Hey everybody, welcome to my channel and welcome to today's video. Today I am talking about the book Al Capone Does My Shirts by Gennifer Choldenko. I have my copy right here. I've had this book since middle school when I read it with my book club in middle school, and then I have since passed the book on to my brothers and they have all enjoyed it, so it's a pretty good read for that middle school age. Here's a little bit about the author Gennifer Choldenko. She grew up in Southern California as the youngest of 4 siblings, and she was growing up near the Bay Area, near San Francisco. She now lives in the Bay Area with her husband and their 2 children. She said she felt like being a writer was chosen for her, although she didn't start off as a writer initially when she got out of college. She took a lot of writing classes throughout school and then got a job writing advertising after she graduated college. In a phone interview, Choldenko said she didn't have the guts to be a writer initially, and that's why she didn't start off that way. She was afraid that she would get rejected, and she did not want to have to face that rejection. So she thought she might have more luck illustrating books. She had some art experience, so she started off doing that in order to get into the world of books. But then she just found herself more and more kind of pushing off all of her illustration projects in order to work on writing a novel that she had kind of going on the side. So she realized that her illustrator experience really helped her write picture books better and helped her visualize everything that she was writing, and it kind of opened up the possibility of writing children's books. And she decided that children's books were perfect for her because she was naturally writing with that young narrator's voice, and she just really enjoyed that age and thought it all fit well with her skill set. So now she writes full-time. That is her career. And she says she has a special, small room in her house where she goes just to write, just so she can focus on everything that she's doing. She likes to dress up as if she's going to work in an office or some other sort of work setting, just to remind herself that this is her career and this is what she's doing for a living. So after she began her writing career, she published Al Capone Does My Shirts in 2004. But writing that book took quite a bit of time. She wanted to make sure that she got everything right because it is a historical fiction novel. So Choldenko said she spent a lot of time in her special little room to write Al Capone. She mentioned in an interview that it was very difficult to write the book because she wanted everything to be historically accurate. So leading up to the publication, she had to do a lot of research about Alcatraz, which is the setting of the book, and then also about the 1930s, the time period that the book is set in. And she struggled a lot with writing from the protagonist's perspective, getting his inner monologue right, because she said she wanted the events and his inner thought process to line up and really complement the action of the story well. And the idea for the book actually came from a newspaper article that she read about children living on Alcatraz Island as children of the workers in the 1930s. So in order to get a really good sense of what it was like to be on the island, she actually went and worked there for a year, kind of as a guide, just helping out in all areas around the island, asking questions whenever she could. So she spent that year also just gathering information in order to make the book as accurate as possible. And this is the book she created. Here is a little a snapshot of what the book is all about. Al Capone Does My Shirts tells the story of children growing up on Alcatraz Island at the height of its time as a prison. The kids, including Moose Flanagan, his sister Natalie, Piper Williams, and Teresa Madiman, are some of the kids living on the island because their parents work for the prison. The children spend their days playing their own games and getting all wrapped up in Piper's schemes. The protagonist, which is Moose, must also take care of his sister Natalie constantly because she has autism. And the story gets its title from the kids' biggest scheme, which is charging their classmates money to get their clothes washed by the infamous Al Capone and the other inmates on the island. So overall, the novel just recounts a series of really unusual childhood adventures as told through the lens of the observant and thoughtful Moose Flanagan. And the characters are definitely what makes this story so unique. Choldenko took a lot of time making them all really three-dimensional, so let's take a look at some of those characters now. The first one being Moose Flanagan. His real name is Matthew, goes by the nickname of Moose. He is the protagonist, 12 years old, living on Alcatraz. He recognizes that he's very responsible and mature for his age, and he kind of has to be in order to take care of Natalie. He's living on Alcatraz in the year 1935 with his sister and their parents because his father is an electrician for the island. Moose's group of friends is pretty small, pretty tight-knit, because he's pretty much forced to hang out with whatever kids happen to also be living on the island at the time. He's the tallest of the group, about 6 foot, and 12 years old, so one of the older ones, definitely one of the bigger ones, and he's also kind of the goody two-shoes of the group, always making the right choices, doing what's right, all of that. But that also makes him out to be a very thoughtful and personal kind of narrator. We can really get inside of his head. He definitely sacrifices a lot of his childhood and freedom in order to take care of Natalie and help out his family in any way that he can. That's very important to him. And then he also has a pretty strange kind of love-hate relationship with Piper Williams, who is the warden's daughter, because even though she's always stirring up trouble and causing schemes, Moose just can't help but like her for whatever reason. Then we have Natalie Flanagan, who is Moose's older sister, but she definitely acts less mature, and that is because she does in fact have autism. Although, this is the 1930s when the book is set, so autism isn't super widely recognized or acknowledged, or people don't know how to treat it exactly. So Natalie is kind of a challenge to her family because they don't really understand her condition, but they try to help her however they can. She has a lot of the symptoms of people with autism. She really likes routine, she likes her repetition, she likes very specific foods, and she likes very specific tasks like organizing little buttons, and then her memory and intelligence is also very impressive. She and Moose have a very tight, close bond just because he takes care of her a lot, almost like a parent sometimes. And the other kids on the island are pretty, understanding and accepting of her, even if they might not understand what her life is like or what's going on inside of her head. But there is one little girl on the island, Teresa, who seems to connect with Natalie pretty well, and then she describes Natalie as living in her own world where sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. Natalie really just adds another dimension of new kind of character to the story that we don't usually get to see, and she provides a lot of different action whenever the kids are going on their adventures because she always accompanies them, even if she's having one of her off days where she's really longing for some sort of routine or habit. Piper Williams is the warden's daughter, and she definitely takes after her father in the boss kind of department. She's very scheming and kind of the ringleader of everybody, and she's always coming up with new activities for everybody to do. She's not inherently, evil or cruel, but she does sort of act as an antagonist just because she's got this kind of troublesome streak that butts head with Moose a lot. And she leads the efforts for the Al Capone laundry scheme that, the book gets its name from. Moose thinks that she's very pretty and pretty attractive, even though he doesn't always agree with her decisions. There's just something about her that he can't help but like. And Piper's confidence and charm kind of grow on him throughout the story, and eventually they become friends. Piper becomes a little, less harmless, and she kind of tames her wild side. But her goal is to meet Al Capone one way or another. Kind of a crazy goal, but that is what it is. And then overall, all of her schemes of trying to meet Al Capone really just result in friendships with people like Moose. Then we have Teresa Madiman. She is another one of the kids growing up on Alcatraz in 1935. She's very headstrong, pretty fearless, but she also has a big heart, and she likes to tag along with the kids on all their adventures. She's very good with interacting with other people. She cares a lot for her baby brother, maybe sometimes too much, kind of smothering him, carrying him around places he shouldn't go. But she always seems to have his best interests at heart, just like she's always able to help Natalie and kind of have her best interests at heart too. Because Teresa's one who's really able to connect with Natalie and help her calm down whenever she's having one of her fits. Of course, we also have to talk about Al Capone himself, as he is, the reason for the title. He doesn't actually appear in the book, but he drives a lot of the action of the story. He is the reason that Alcatraz is so famous. He's one of their, main criminals, and he's the reason that Moose cannot talk too much about where he lives or what his father does. And then during Piper's little laundry scheme, the kids are all advertising that Al Capone will be washing the shirts, so he's kind of their main selling point. Even though they can't really prove that it will be Al Capone doing it, he's a big reason that their little scheme is such a success. But in the end, he also proves to be pretty helpful to Moose, because through a couple little notes they exchange Al Capone is able to pull some strings and help get Natalie into a special school. There are several qualities of this book that make it, suitable as a young adult literature. It is the first book in the series. There is Al Capone Does My Shirts, Al Capone Shines My Shoes, Does My Homework, and Al Capone Throws Me a Curve. Gennifer Choldenko didn't originally intend to make a whole series out of the Al Capone Alcatraz idea, but it was so successful the first time around that it turned into a series. So basically each book just has more of the antics of the kids growing up on the island and all of the unusual things they get to encounter. This book is also good as young adult fiction because of its narration style. Even if, not every kid is growing up in the environment like Moose is, he's a very relatable guy, and readers can see themselves either in Moose or see parts of themselves in his friends. They have the curiosity, they have all their little schemes, they get in trouble sometimes and have to work their way out of it, and they make new friends along the way and learn some life lessons as they go. And those are all things that all young readers are going to have to experience at one point or another. This book is also pretty unique because it is targeted to young adults, but it's also historical fiction, very immersive historical fiction aimed at young children, young adults. Choldenko took a lot of effort to make sure that Moose's voice as a narrator was, while it was also, appropriate for the 1930s, it was also something that young readers could relate to and kind of get a sense of the experience of the 1930s within the pages. Also, the fact that this is a first-person narration style makes it more suited for young adult readers, really immerses the reader right into the position of that character and helps you get into Moose's mind. Readers can kind of see Moose has his own troubles going on inside his head. He wants to make sure he's making everybody happy while also trying to live out his own life, so they really get to see that sort of conflict within his head. I really think that this book is good for anyone in middle school, grades 6 through 8. That's when I read it. That's when my brothers have read it. I think the characters are just all right about that age. They're all about, anywhere from 10 to 13 years old. So middle school is really the time when their actions and choices might be most relatable. The language of all the characters really fits that time period and that, age range as well. It would be appropriate in all the life experiences, and just the mindsets of the kids also really fit with middle schoolers, so I think they would be able to relate to the book best. The one sort of sensitive subject that is covered in the book is autism, and that is mostly just heightened because this is autism in the 1930s. Gennifer Choldenko actually has a sibling, a sister with autism, so she kind of wanted to include that element in the story, even though it is the 1930s. But she does just a very nice job of portraying Natalie as someone that's, human, but still has something a little bit different going on in her head. And there is one scene from page 118 to 119 that I'm going to read from a little bit, and it just kind of shows how, one time of Natalie kind of acting out because of her autism and the way that the people around her handle it. So at this point, Natalie has just gotten upset. Moose has just disrupted a pile of her buttons that she was just stacking and counting, and that really throws her off out of her routine, and we kind of see her react here. This is the way my mom finds us when she gets off the boat, her music bag over her shoulder. Moose! My mother looks at Natalie and then me. What happened? What's the matter? She runs toward us. I don't know, Mom. I tipped over her buttons. Why did you let her take them out? I don't know, she wanted them. How long has she been like this? Half an hour, maybe. My mom kneels down. She strokes Nat's face gently, pushes the hair out of her eyes. Get them out of here. Mom spits the words out. Mom, I won't have her make a spectacle. It's really not like that. They like her, I say. Now, Moose. So you kind of see there's an outburst. Natalie has been really upset because her buttons have all been knocked over, and she kind of just shuts down and retreats into herself. And Moose's mom is very kind of ashamed of what Natalie is doing because she doesn't quite know how to handle it. And of course now we know more about autism and how to help people with it, but at the time it was a lot more uncommon, and so that was just one example of how the family reacted to all of it. Overall, as my take on the book, as an English major, I think the characters, especially Moose and Natalie, are very realistic and likable, relatable. This book also kind of gave me my first perspective into autism. I've since learned more about it, but this was a very nice way of seeing it, you know, firsthand, just nicely woven into a character without making it be like the forefront part of it. As an education minor, I want to teach special education in the future, and I really appreciate the inclusion of Natalie's autism in the book. I've met a lot of students that have very similar, you know, habits or qualities, and so it's just really interesting to see it played out in a book as well. If I taught this book in a class, it would probably be best for middle schoolers. I'd say 7th or 8th grade, just because it seems to be about the right age level, and they'd be able to, you know, handle the amount of reading. This would be a very good book to do some sort of interdisciplinary history lessons along with it about life in the 1930s or about the history of Alcatraz Island, something like that. And I would want to make sure that there's time for both me to read out loud to the students so they can hear the dialogue and everything played out, and I'd also want them to read some on their own so they could practice their own reading skills. Any sort of unusual aspects about the book, I definitely think that the narrator, being a young child, is pretty unique just because Choldenko took so much time and effort to get inside Moose's mind and make him believable. And then also there are some really funny chapter titles in this book that all kind of preview something that's going to come up in the book, maybe some unique little memory, like there is American Laugh-Nosed Beat and Convict Choir Boy. They've all got some really funny titles right up here in the front. So overall, it is a very entertaining book. A lot can be learned from it about people and characters, and definitely going back in history. So I would really recommend this book. You don't have to be a middle schooler to read it, but maybe starting out then. And that is my summary and little description of the book Al Capone Does My Shirts.